Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It is episode 2638 of The Tom Woods Show, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Sarah Kernion. I have been talking a little bit in my email newsletter about autism and RFK Jr. and the completely bizarre but sadly predictable response to his common sense observations about why we want to help people who have this condition and the families who care for them. And Sarah, who has two such children of her own, has a particular insight. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of her Substack called Inchstones, as opposed to milestones, inchstones.substack.com. I'll also link to that at tomwoods.com/2638. And Sarah is the case, I get a lot of people writing to me, I want to come on your show. And it's almost never a fit. But Sarah, you wrote to me, I did not know you. I have a friend of yours who just wrote and said, I'm so glad to hear Sarah's going to be on your show. She's such a champion for all of us. You wrote to me, I took one look at it and I said, this is an absolute definite. So welcome.
Tom, thank you so much for allowing me to have my voice in this conversation.
Absolutely. So first of all, where are you coming to us from?
Westfield, New Jersey, by way of Pittsburgh.
Okay. Well, when I was in grad school, I spent every summer of the 4th of July weekend on the Jersey Shore in Point Pleasant, Bayhead area. I have very fond memories.
Beautiful. It gets a bad rap.
Yeah, it does. It does. There are some lovely parts of New Jersey. Absolutely right. All right. So let's talk about your background. You have three children, and maybe try to describe to us, what family life is like.
Sure. I have three, as I say, beautiful and healthy children. I have a typical developing 12-year-old daughter, and I have two children with severe and profound non-speaking autism. My daughter, Millie, who's 10, and my son, Mac, who is 7. I stand in a particular unique position in that I have a boy and a girl with severe non-speaking autism, and they're not twins. And my reality is one that requires 24-hour round-the-clock care for them. And this is not political. This is children, severely autistic children who need help toileting. They need help to eat. They need help getting dressed. They need help at every turn of their day. And that is what I'm here for. I'm here to speak that truth into life because I'm not one. There are millions of families like me.
Do you think, by the way, and I guess we're just speculating here, but they say that autism is a spectrum. But do you sometimes think that people for whom autism manifests itself in a kind of a social awkwardness or, saying an inappropriate thing, and what your children have are so fundamentally different that it's not really a spectrum?
I believe we're in two different camps. And I do believe that this is not about quirky neurodiversity and neurodivergence. As a late diagnosed woman with ADHD, that's a prevalent bucket of people that were not really seen in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s when I was growing up. I speak to companies about the profound competitive advantages that neurodiversity can have if they hire employees. This is not that autism. This is a totally different camp. And I'm here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the autism that is heavy, it is heartbreaking, and it requires a pivot to that reality to be spoken into life here and listened to.
Now, when you say that you're speaking out, what exactly is it that you're speaking out about?
If we aren't free to talk about what actually is the lived experience of my children and me as their mother, we are completely losing the chance for free and independent thought and action. I don't believe that I should be silenced in this to allow for hand-holding for the neurodiversity movement. And while I believe in it, I believe it needs to be centered on the sliver and the crack in the system that RFK spoke to. And this is why this specific Autism Awareness Month is illuminating that.
Okay, so you just said something very interesting, that the neurodiversity movement. So this is first of all, the very word neurodiversity or neurodiverse. This is very new,
Right.
And it's, I guess it's a way of having an umbrella term to include a variety of people who have various. Again, you have to be careful what word you say, right? You can't call it a disability because it's a gift, and it's a,
It's a superpower. This isn't a superpower, Tom.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so what you want to do? So are you saying? I guess what I want to know is, are you saying that movement, which wants to portray quote neurodiversity as a series of kind of cool quirks that some people have that might actually give them advantages in certain situations, is simultaneously trying to push to the side the experience of you and your family? Are they explicit about that?
I have been, since April 16th, completely pivoted on my platform because of exactly what you said. Yes. One of my favorite, I'm new to this libertarian movement, right? And theology, the index of allowable opinion. Everyone from the far left wants to celebrate neurodiversity as a superpower. Sure. And the right wants to use the word that we can't say to credit autism too. It rhymes with something like smaxine.
Yeah, right. No, I think we all know what we're talking about here. Why do you think they're doing this? Well, why can't they say, look, for some people, it's a lifelong debilitating problem. And, given that we spend all our time talking about how we can't make people invisible, it would be wrong of us to make some people invisible unless we were a bunch of hypocrites, which maybe they are.
I believe that liberty is built on the courage to speak and live in reality. And the reality that I live is that I have a 10-year-old daughter, and a 7-year-old boy son who likely will be living with me for the rest of their lives, and currently and likely for the rest of their lives be unable to use the toilet alone. So as a 41-and-a-half-year-old mother, I live in a distinctly different reality and truth that the quirky kid that learned to drive late, that had to get occupational therapy to try and drive a car in an open parking lot 1,000 times versus the sibling that only took one lesson. I live in a different reality, and that is being silenced. And it is doing the work that I shed spotlight on, which is helping families with severe autism celebrate those small incremental inchstones, as I call them, versus the milestones that will never be reached, ever. And that is the biggest chasm that I believe that RFK has shed a spotlight on. And it's not about politics. This is about allowing for the truth of families like mine to be heard.
What's an example of an inchstone?
I use this example a lot. You have five children, correct?
Yeah.
I'm sure that at one point in your life, there was Play-Doh around your home.
Yeah, sure.
Or Lego sets. And when you have children that don't proactively play, because play is the formidable way that we learn as children. Montessori education, teaching through play. Your children likely got a Play-Doh set for a gift or a birthday, or you're brought home from school, and they said, Daddy, I made you a flower from school, and it's this dried Play-Doh. My reality is this. My children wouldn't touch Play-Doh. The texture of Play-Doh made their hand repel. They don't have the strength of fine motor muscles or the proper development of their fine motor skills to even roll the Play-Doh if they desired to roll the Play-Doh. And when I spent years, specifically with my daughter, who's a few years older than my son, when she presented, actually her therapist presented it to me, a rolled snake of Play-Doh. That's the inchstone for me, because the work that it took to get my severely nonverbal autistic daughter to roll Play-Doh into a worm is an inchstone. And I would celebrate and do celebrate those, because the world is not seeing my children for anything more than, we don't talk about those small wins. That's not really a win. Well, it is for me.
Yeah.
And it is for my daughter.
Yeah.
That's the inchstone.
Yeah, absolutely. How long have you been writing the Substack?
Since April 1st, 2025.
It's that new.
It's that new. I have been sharing, and I have been speaking and sharing my truth as a mother since the birth of my first child. And I was in the mommy blog community in 2012, 13. That was the foray into writing. I've always been a truth teller of experience. I suffered very severe postpartum anxiety with my first. So that first original platform of Saturday's Story, which is my company name, is and was the beginning of me speaking my truth. I spoke openly about my postpartum experience and found that in the truth of that so many people did not want to discuss, I was leading with such vulnerability and ridding a lot of other mothers of shame along with that personal experience. So that's where my platform then turned into very openly, vulnerably sharing about motherhood from an angle that no one chooses. You know, I say no one wakes up at 31 years old and goes, you know what I want? 2 kids with non-speaking autism.
Yeah.
That's not on the bingo card, as the kids say these days. That's not there. And I am so thankful for my ability to speak and write, to speak this in my truth into existence for my kids.
Hey, everybody, this isn't a sponsor message. It's an announcement that I have 11 awesome free things to give you that you're going to love, and not one of them is an ebook. For instance, my public speaking secrets that come from my 30-year career, or Dr. Miriam Grossman on how to inoculate your kids against gender ideology, my 10-lesson middle school course on the foundations of liberty. It isn't available for sale anywhere, but if you want it, it's on the freebies page that I'm telling you about now. Here's one you'll like: a simple way to generate $50 per month in perpetuity without work. Now, I'm wording it that way specifically to annoy people who refuse to believe anything. Woods, there's no such thing, they'll say. Oh, but there absolutely is. I earn 3 times that much with it, and I am not joking. Or how about this? Chances are you're right like a dork. I hate to break it to you, but since 90% of the public does, that likely includes you. I'll help you stop, which means you'll stand out in whatever you do. Or how about a case study in which one of my friends, who built a 7-figure recipe website, shares how she did it? There are more, 11 in total. To get them, all you have to do is say maybe to my awesome School of Life program that everyone raves about. Give it a spin for 30 days for $1, and you can have the 11 freebies in perpetuity. Get them now at 11freebies.com. So the reason I thought the Substack had been around longer is that I looked at it very superficially just as we were setting up to record. I clicked on it, and it's got items all over the front page. So I thought, okay, you must have been doing this for a long time. But as I say, somebody wrote to me out of the blue who knew that you were going to be on the show. So it seems like maybe you do have a bit of a reputation already. Is that so?
I think that I have a platform that allows for the credibility behind my words to have weight. I have always spoken the truth about motherhood and about child rearing. And I've always led with that every mother, every parent, your goal in life is not to create the child that you desired. It's to lead and allow your children to become the best versions of who they're meant to be. And that is the platform that I believe that I have the weight in. That is the spotlight that I feel that I have earned through my writing. And specifically this April, deciding to begin the deep dive of my profound autism parenting on April 1st, 16 days before this spotlight on profound autism illuminated, is ironic, to say the least.
Well, so let's say something about RFK. Every normal person understood what he meant when he delivered those remarks about children who will never do A, B, C, and D. You know, the people who have, we can say it's milder forms of autism, or we can say it's a completely different disorder, whatever we're going to say, immediately jumped up to get the attention of everybody and said, why, I'm very competent and I can do all these things. I know because we weren't talking about you, and everybody knew we weren't talking about you. That response was absolutely bizarre. I mean, a normal person would have said, well, it's terrific to see that somebody cares enough about this condition that it seems to be on the rise, that maybe we might start to get some answers. That would be what would happen in a normal society. But instead it was a whole bunch of attention seekers insisting that everybody know that they, who don't have the condition being described, are perfectly competent. Now, if we could have had a normal conversation about this, that would have been quite welcome. Incidentally, let me say, I said on an episode last week that you no doubt heard him say that by September, we're going to know what exposures are responsible for this, the rise in this condition. Now, that is an astonishing promise, really, because the official narrative is nobody can ever figure this out and it's just a mystery. But if he's saying by September we're going to know, either he has extraordinary confidence in the scientists he's lined up, or he already knows the answer. What do you think?
I live a life and am grounded in reality that does not allow me to give energy to the narrative or the backlash of a political agenda or an answer that's going to be given in September. I am so deep in the reality of 24/7 caregiving that whatever comes out in September is going to be exactly the same kind of sliver or fracture in a system that has proven to remind me and the millions of families like me that naming the truth of what we live is apparently forbidden. And I believe that freedom to speak how I am right now is collapsing because of people telling me to sit down, to not name my reality. So what are my thoughts on it? If this keeps the conversation going, I'm all for it. I generally don't care to know what that he's going to prove, or if he already knows, or what. But I believe that this needs to come down to the parents and families and communities that are seeing these realities up close and are making the changes for their families from a decentralized location.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your letter to Joe Rogan? Maybe we can amplify that.
Sure. Let's get that back up. I feel like he is one of the only people right now that will listen from the platform that he has. I'm happy to read that or to just comment on it right now.
What are you trying to, obviously you're bringing to his attention, the kinds of stories you're telling today, but no doubt you're appealing to the fact that with an audience of his size, he can accomplish things that very few people can.
I'm piggybacking off of his spotlight recently with the telepathy tapes, and Kai Dickens, the producer that really has researched and is getting a lot of discussions, amazing dialogue about the powers of children with non-speaking autism. I believe that is a wonderful category to discuss, and we need to talk about the genetics and the science behind the why, and where that brilliance of my children is trapped in their bodies that do not cooperate. And so that was my plea to Joe Rogan, is that I see this every day, when I am with my children, from getting them dressed to putting them to bed to everything in between, there is a brilliance locked inside their bodies. And I do believe that I'm one of the only people that's really speaking this into life, that this is not your TikTok version of neurodiversity and autism. This is not the kid that is asking for social inclusion on their college dorm room floor. This is a much greater and a very different autism conversation. And I do believe that it's neurological, it's cellular, and we need to have that discussion. And that's why I pled to him for that. I think we need more answers, more research, and the bureaucratic big pharma seems to be pushing down stories like mine and pushing us off to the fringe continuously.
I started listening to the telepathy tapes, and then I've read some critiques of it that this or that thing about it is sloppy. But the thing that I remembered I took the most out of it really was one of the parents having been told either by teachers or a doctor maybe that your child, of course, doesn't know any of the letters or numbers. Your child doesn't know this, that, and the other thing, and can't ever know those things. But that through this other means of communicating with them, they discovered that, no, actually, I really do have a real brain that's stuck in here, and I really have absorbed all this, which in a way makes it worse.
Non-speaking autism does not mean non-thinking. And if we are to live in a world that is defending the truth and defending the voiceless, I'm here to defend that liberty. And the ability to name what is real and what is a reality of not just a few, millions of other mothers and fathers and caregivers like myself. We lose everything. If we are not allowed to name our reality and to be listened to, we lose everything. And there are different ways in which to look at the telepathy tapes and ask questions. If we are not allowed to stay curious, aren't we becoming just defenders of, what's the word I'm looking for, Tom? Defenders of a decay, defenders of death, defenders of a sentence that is just going to stay static and die. Isn't that what we are built on? We are built on trying to constantly reorient, constantly ask questions. I am a new student to the theories of John Boyd, and one of his most profound papers was Destruction and Creation. And I believe I'm here to help destroy the narrative that autism looks like this. This is what autism looks like. No, it's more than that. It's way bigger than that. And I believe that we can create pathways through this specific, my lived experience, my mission in life, to create pathways to free and independent action. And that is what I desire for myself, and specifically for my children who can't speak and who likely will never live on their own.
I'd like you to come to the U.S. Virgin Islands with me, and no, not aboard a cruise. For 2 years, I've run the Tom Woods Elite Mastermind, where smart and ambitious people help each other maximize their business success. Forget the vague generalities and the fortune cookie maxims you get in business books. Here, you'll get ideas and strategies designed specifically for you. My own success has been dramatically increased when smart people who knew my specific situation told me, do this specific thing. We meet in person 3 times a year, always in an exciting place, and one of our meetings in the coming year will take place in St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We'll sail around paradise as we help each other reach that next level in our businesses. And a certain magician who fooled Penn and Teller on their TV show will be there to do close-up magic just for our small group. If that sounds awesome, that's because it obviously is. If you want in, head over to woodsmastermind.com and let's talk. woodsmastermind.com. I'm afraid I'm about to ask you a question that's deeply personal, and if you want to tell me to go jump in a lake, you absolutely do so.
Okay.
But because I have multiple children, I recall when we would have a new baby, and it wouldn't be like the caricature on TV that the baby gets all the attention and the other kids become envious. It wasn't that. But But still, it would mean that temporarily there were some things we couldn't do together, all as a family.
Correct.
I can't help wondering how your 12-year-old daughter deals with the situation.
I actually got to answer that question. A small college in Florida, Beacon College, did a small 5-minute glimpse into my life and how living as a typical developing sibling with 2 siblings with severe special needs, how that impacts her. I have a radical view of holding space for my typical developing child's experience in life. I make it and have made it since the first noticeable developmental delays of her sister were landing, how important it was to hold as much space for her development as well. To go on trips where her siblings aren't the number one priority. To always make choices that allow her to have my time fully. And I know that I sit in the position of privilege of being able to do that. And I speak for others that don't have that ability to do that. They should be able to. They should be able to take their typical developing child and have ice cream or a pizza night, not be selected because it's the quietest, not be selected because the booth is the most comfortable. That's where my typical daughter's experience will be hers to share one day. And I'm very sensitive to it. I have a lot of very conscious planning that I do for her to know that her life is not swallowed by non-speaking autism.
Are there, let's say, parent-driven support groups out there? There must be online, at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a lot online. There is a lot of sibling support groups online. I specifically have her meeting up with a girl in her mid-20s who has a brother with severe autism. My daughter is 12 going on 18, and her emotional intelligence, given that she does have siblings with such severe special needs, is very high. And I've noticed that she really likes older mentors, in her life as being the oldest child. So she gets to walk around New York City with a 25-year-old friend of a friend's daughter who knows what she's going through. So yes, there are. And I think carving that out and whatever that looks like best for your family is wonderful. There are many different organizations that offer that. It's finding the one that fits best for your typical children amongst the neurodiversity of severe autism.
What is it that you are, but wait a minute, in these support groups though, are these groups distinct enough so that it's not a matter of the, I don't mean to trivialize things, but it's not a matter of the mom of the quirky kid is in the group with you and you're describing completely different lived realities?
Mm-hmm. That's where I think that this conversation is trying to divide. They do. There is a distinctive nature of it for sure. I think that we need to continue to grow this specific profound autism community. I think we need to broaden it from a sense of building it on the lived reality of not only the parents, but the siblings, what that means to their life. The healthy fear that I have, I will not be here one day. And that will likely, and pending, what the universe has in store for me, that means my typical developing daughter is the name on the trust. She is the name on the financial record. She will be the guardian for her siblings and the decision maker. That is really scary to name because the parents of the quirky kid or the one with the speech delay or the one who has a tough time holding a fork or maybe buttoning his shirt for school is a very different sibling than my children are to their older sister.
What exactly is it that you want to have happen? What are you calling for?
To have everyone reorient and commanding that we are centered in this conversation right now. The truth that was spoken about my children is different than the neurodiversity movement of superpowers. And I want answers. I want research. I want science-driven insight as to what factors contributed to the brilliance of my children locked in bodies that do not work with them. And I'm asking for that. I'm asking for science and the researchers and the scientists to let that unfurl for my population of severe non-speaking autistic children and their families. This is not to cure autism. This is to cure the bodies that are stuck in whatever way, whether that's an environmental variety, whether that's a holistic health reorientation. I want research into what I can do to get my children to live their most independent lives as they develop. I believe that that is what we stand for as parents, as any parent does. And that's what my call to action is. I want more research done on this population of individuals, and it is much larger than the broad neurodiversity movement wants to allow for.
Now, I know you've said that this is not a political agenda you have. You're not favoring a particular political party or anything of that nature. But we live in a highly politicized world. I mean, we live in a world in which, because RFK Jr. is now associated with a particular party and a particular president, it's somehow bad that he wants to look into this question. I mean, this is not normal that people would think of it this way. So I wonder, in the various support groups that you have interacted with, are you coming across moms who might say, look, I'm not particularly thrilled with the Trump White House, but for heaven's sake, I can't afford to be worried about that. I'm happy that there's some guy talking about this.
That's exactly what I feel. And I think that when we start to kill the messenger, we are losing the ability to stay curious. And if curiosity as to why my children are locked in bodies that are not allowed to show and allow them to live freely and independently as they age, we are continuing to quash, and we're actually doing the opposite of what scientific inquiry asks us to do. You know, I believe in the scientific method, but if we are shutting down the questions of the realities of profound autism and the children that I raise and happily and beautiful and focus on the beautiful nature of who they are that I get to see every day. If we are going to kill the messenger about the political nature and the alliance of RFK, we are losing sight. And we're damned if that's going to become the case. That's very scary for someone like me.
Is there any, this might not be something you know, but is there any way to know the percentage of people who are broadly diagnosed with autism who have the non-speaking variety that your children have?
The numbers that RFK illuminated were that 25% of the autistic population has the form of autism that is severe and profound. That means 24/7 care, a one-on-one parent, aide, caregiver from the moment they go to bed at night to the moment they wake up in the morning, and likely every hour in between, because there are severe sleep anomalies that come with severe autism as well. There is an exhaustion amongst this community, and that's what I hope to utilize my energy to speak to.
The word exhaustion was the word that has been running through my mind from the beginning of this conversation. And I know that it's not your aim to show that you have a superhero cape on and look at what I can accomplish. But yet I think a lot of people listening to this would wonder, could I do what she's doing? Could I really rise to that challenge myself? Would I be able to endure? And somehow you have.
You said at the beginning when we pressed record that there is a desire to say, people are asking for too much attention, right? She's asking for so much attention. Yeah. Yes, I am. Firmly committed into asking for attention to my reality. And that makes people very uncomfortable, because the uncomfortable truth of the life that I live as the mother to Millie and Mac is not comfortable. It means things that you don't want to hear are truths. And I find the energy to do that because of who I am and how I've always been. And telling the truth, ironically, is part of the neurodiversity movement, how ADHD and high-functioning autistic people, they tend to tell the truth. That's where I live.
You know, you are the kind of person RFK Jr. wanted to give attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
unfortunately, filling that void very quickly were people who are obviously not the ones he's talking to. We do want to hear from you, because it's important for us to know exactly the extent to which, what kind of a problem we're facing here. Because now, look, I don't know. I'm just talking out loud here. I just speculating, but I could imagine there are some people in the medical community who have their own reasons for wanting to downplay this condition.
of course.
I rather suspect that the truth of the matter is going to involve truths that are profoundly embarrassing to them, and truths that we dare not utter. I have good reason to believe that could well be the case, and so I think it's in their interest to downplay you also, and make it seem like, we have some quirky kids, but that's a lot worse things could happen. If they can keep that front and center, then it doesn't seem like the national emergency that it really is. And I don't know that that's what's happening, but it would make sense.
Well, institutions love slogans. I was talking about this with another mom online today. I'm not a slogan. I'm not Sarah, a superhero. I am here to remind, and I am happy to talk in detail with anyone that asks me, well, what is your reality? I have not had one person online, except for other families living exactly parallel lives to me with profound non-speaking autism, say to me, Sarah, we hear you. What is your lived reality? Because when your children have such deep sensory processing disorder and deep apraxia, which is the oral motor ability to get from what they think out through their voice box, or what they think out through a alternative and augmentative communication device, an AAC, to be able to press that. So to think it, to have their body type it out or press it on a mini iPad. If that reality is too uncomfortable for people to hear, then I'm going to shout louder, and I'm not going anywhere, because those realities, I am not unique. That's what keeps coming back to me as I speak more and more on this. I know that I am not unique. And there is a wildly huge population of parents and families that are like mine, who wake up after being up twice in the middle of the night, trying to get their child back to sleep at 10 and 7 years old, who wake up in the morning to their child undoing themselves from their backwards sensory zip-up fleece pajamas that have wiggled and Houdini'd their way out of them and have wiped their feces on a wall. That is my reality. And that has not happened once. That has happened a lot. That has happened upwards of 40 to 50 times in my parenting journey. So if that truth makes people uncomfortable about sensory processing disorder, apraxia, dyspraxia, that I'm here to shout it louder and to use every megaphone I have to get that reality out, because that's the autism that no one wants to talk about.
Let's tell people again about your Substack. It's inchstones, again, as a contrast with milestones. So inchstones.substack.com. So I'll put it in the video description if you're watching on video. Otherwise at tomwoods.com/2638. What have I neglected to ask you that would have helped you express what you want to say better?
This is not anything more than what seems to me political tribalism on the right and the left coming after a woman who aligns with neither party and wants to speak the truth so that the realities of science and holistic medicine and the environment and everything in between that my children have lived is discussed, is taken into consideration when we discuss autism, and we're not bucketed to be silenced because of our lived experience as mothers. We need support. Caregiver burnout is so high, and we do not, as a country or even as at the higher level institutions, have the support needed for families like mine. I sit in a very privileged situation to be able to have caregiving and help. And that is not the norm of the reality of most parents. And I want to make that very clear. I know very, very well that truth needs to be said too. That is why I can sit here and have the energy to speak for the families that have nothing left.
Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for coming on and talking to us about your reality and about this important topic that has been obscured by many different people for reasons that are not entirely clear, but none of them honorable. And I want to strongly urge people to go to inchstones.substack.com and check out what you're doing there and spread the word about it. Particularly if we have anybody listening who is in a similar situation, this would be even of more benefit to them. But everybody needs to be aware of this. This is not a matter of they're just diagnosing it better, but it was always there. That line, there's no way that applies to this.
That's right.
We need to understand what's going on. So do you have a final word?
The freedom to speak about this lies in those who actually live it and will not lie about what the reality is and demanding the world take notice. I don't believe that my children should be institutionalized or put away, which is what happened decades ago to children like mine. And we do have parents that are showing up in ways that are so radical for their children. And it is costing us our lives, our independence, our ability to live with our own desires and the freedom to do so. I don't want, nor do I ever desire to have that be an option. So we need to do better for the parents and caregivers and the children to allow them to live lives that are fully and freely independent as well. And I am so thankful for this platform, Tom. You are a defender of truth and defend liberty and the voiceless. And I really thank you for this time.
Well, the pleasure's mine, Sarah. Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.